Hey everyone, and Happy New Year! And today we are diving into the first full moon of 2026, being a Cancer full moon happening on Saturday, January 3rd at 4:01 a.m. Central Time at 13 degrees of Cancer. And Cancer is the moon's home sign, and so when full moons land in the sign of Cancer, they tend to feel pretty strongly, and they tend to land pretty loudly in the body and the nervous system, and they can even bring up old memories and, feelings of nostalgia. And so even though we are in the middle of Capricorn season, a full moon in Cancer means that our feelings and our emotions will come up to the surface, whether we've scheduled in time for them or not. With this being the first lunation of 2026, I was really feeling like it kind of gives this new year like a slower and gentler start as we're releasing old memories and old patterns and old cycles from the past and, leaving those in 2025 as we move into this new year. And so if you're interested in how this full moon is going to be felt and experienced along with all the other astrology we've got going on, then feel free to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can stay updated on what's going on in the sky. And also, if you're new here, hi, I'm Mackenzie, aka Astromac, and I'm a professional astrologer and I talk all things astrology on this channel. And I also have a Patreon where when you join, you get access to a group Discord along with all kinds of astrology goodies. And I also offer a bunch of different astrology readings, including birth chart readings and transit readings and mini readings. So if you're interested in any of that, then I'll link all of that down below. Now let's pull up the chart for this full moon and dive right in. And so as always, as we can see here, a full moon is when the sun and the moon are sitting directly opposite each other in the sky, and the sun is able to fully illuminate the moon. And that's why full moons are associated with things being illuminated and things being revealed, as they kind of are like these spotlight moments in the lunation cycle where something is coming to fruition. And so they tend to be times of culmination where it's like our past manifestations are, blooming and coming to fruition. And so because of this, it means that full moons are also associated with endings, and it's like a time of release where it's like we're letting go of those things that we no longer need, that no longer serve us, in order to, grab onto what's next. And so full moons are also times where it's like, as things are being illuminated, it means that things may get revealed to us, or we may have revelations of our own where it's just like we get these moments of clarity and things are brought to our conscious awareness. And with this heightened awareness that we have during full moons, it also brings heightened sensitivity. And so, full moons are associated with just these times where we're feeling a little more emotional. And so full moons tend to bring these emotional and energetic release points where it's like we're releasing those things that no longer serve us. And the moon in astrology actually rules over our emotions. And so with the moon transiting its home sign of Cancer and being a full moon in Cancer, that means that all of these full moon themes will be amplified that much more strongly because, Cancer is just this emotional and sensitive and instinctual and intuitive sign. And so again, full moons bring culmination and awareness, and it also brings emotional clarity. And so with this full moon happening in Cancer, that means it's highlighting all things Cancer. And in astrology, Cancer governs things like our feelings of emotional safety and security, and our emotional needs and our emotional patterns, and also our attachment patterns. It also governs our family and our ancestry and our roots. And it's also that feeling of belonging, belonging to a group of people, or feeling like you belong to something and feeling rooted that way. It also governs our home and that most private, sensitive part of ourselves. It also governs our memories from the past, and so it's often associated with things like, past memories and nostalgia. Cancer is also a very nurturing and protective sign, and so it also represents how we self-soothe or how we don't self-soothe, and it's also how we nurture ourselves and take care of ourselves and nurture and take care of the people in our lives as well. And so a full moon in Cancer tends to get pretty emotional because it's highlighting that sensitive private part of ourselves, and it also has to do with those people that we are closest with. And so we may get a little bit emotionally triggered under a full moon like this, especially by those people that we are closest to. And so with this full moon happening at 13 degrees of Cancer, this is in the middle of the sign. And so there's kind of there's experience here. And so there's history and emotional patterns that we are well familiar with. And so this full moon doesn't exactly want you to analyze your emotions and question why you're feeling them, but it wants you to acknowledge your feelings and feel your feelings. And so I can imagine we're probably going to be feeling a little more sensitive and a little more emotional around this full moon. And so we may be experiencing memories from the past, maybe surfacing, and it may be experienced as these feelings of nostalgia. Because remember, full moons illuminate and they bring things to light. And so it may be past memories are kind of brought to our awareness, or memories that we may have forgotten about, or, memories that we may have even not wanted to remember. But they're coming up to be brought to our awareness so that we can, release the part of these memories that no longer serve us and heal those memories as well. This full moon is also loosely conjunct the planet Jupiter, and so there may be some bigger emotions or sensitive spots being brought to our conscious awareness regarding all of these Cancerian themes, but it's really helping to illuminate them in order to, heal them and bring a little more clarity. And so as this energy is being illuminated, it might be that we experience some kind of emotional release in order to move forward. So this is not the time to shove your emotions down and put them in a box and save them for a later day. This is the time to actually acknowledge how you're feeling and really let those emotions rise to the surface and express those emotions, because, they're coming up for a reason. And so take some time to reflect on your own emotional patterns under this full moon, especially those ones that may keep you stuck or repeating those unhealthy cycles. And actually under the light of this full moon, some of those patterns or cycles may be, brought to our awareness. And it all starts with just having that awareness that you even have that pattern. Maybe you have a pattern that it's when you get triggered emotionally, you kind of default to this feeling of you feel unworthy or you feel unlovable when you feel these messy emotions. Or maybe you have a pattern of kind of avoiding feeling these messy or uncomfortable emotions because you don't like feeling them. Or maybe you have a pattern that when you get triggered, it's kind of you get stuck in these really intense emotional states, and you may even ruminate rather than actually feeling your feelings and moving it out of your nervous system and expressing how you feel. Or maybe you're a little bit like me and you have a pattern of isolating yourself when you're feeling an intense wave of emotions, and you don't like to tell anyone how you're feeling, and you'd rather deal with it on your own because you don't want to seem like you're a burden or whatever the brain likes to tell us. And just so you know, having feelings and having emotions does not make you a burden at all. Another common pattern that people have is, people pleasing, where we have a tendency of, putting other people's feelings or approval above our own, really leading to, hiding our true feelings in order to avoid conflict or avoid having to have those difficult conversations or whatever it might be. There's a lot of different ways in how we can, suppress our emotions that, end up becoming these patterns or these unhealthy cycles that we end up repeating. And so those were just a few examples. So really try to pay attention to your emotional reactions on and around this full moon, because it's really trying to bring our awareness to these patterns that we may be unconsciously repeating. And like I said earlier, it all starts with having an awareness. And so once you have that awareness of, whatever your pattern might be, then just, noticing when you're repeating that pattern. And this noticing takes practice. It's not something that you notice once and you're able to, nip it in the butt. Because if it's kind of these deeply ingrained patterns that these Cancer things tend to be, then, it takes noticing it over and over and over again. And then, being honest with yourself and then actively working on healing that pattern. For example, maybe you lash out at people when you're feeling triggered. And so maybe you notice as you're lashing out at someone that you're you're repeating a cycle in that moment. And so maybe you're able to stop yourself in the moment, or, if you're not able to in the moment, then maybe afterwards, apologizing and then just actively trying to do better next time. And that's how we work on healing these patterns. And this is how we work on releasing those patterns as well. And as we're working on healing these patterns, it also helps us to heal the relationships in our lives with those people that we're closest to, as well as that relationship that we have with ourselves. And like I always say, just remember that feeling is healing, and the more that you can lean into this feeling energy and the healing energy that this full moon brings, then the outcome can be greater self-understanding and self-acceptance and leaving room for profound inner growth to occur. And speaking of inner growth, like I said earlier, this full moon is loosely conjunct the planet Jupiter, who is traveling retrograde in the sign of Cancer and is really, expanding our inner world and expanding our emotional landscape. And Jupiter is that planet that has a tendency to expand whatever it touches. And so with it loosely conjunct a full moon like this, that means that our emotions can feel bigger and more meaningful and even more symbolic. And so we can expect for old stories around, safety and belonging and our feelings of emotional security to be really coming up for review under this full moon, especially because, Jupiter retrograde is also forming a square to Chiron, who just stationed direct the day before this full moon. And so there may be old stories coming up under this full moon around things like, caretaking, or where we maybe learn to be overgiving of our time and our energy for these people in our lives for whatever reason. Or, maybe you learn that you had to be the strong one for whatever reason. And so you learn to kind of like put your emotions on the back burner rather than, learning to ask for help and support when you need it. And so Jupiter isn't asking us to grow by doing more, but it's really asking you to grow by, understanding why you may be responding the way that you do when you feel vulnerable or triggered or whatever it might be. Jupiter is also asking us to be honest with ourselves and really reflect on if we're using our old emotional patterns as an excuse for why we can't, grow outside of our comfort zone rather than, using it as an opportunity to, release these things and grow. Like maybe you already have an awareness of a certain pattern that you have, and instead of, actively working on healing it, you just continue to use it as an excuse for whatever. And so this lunation is really here to help us grow and expand our inner world in a way that is deeply nourishing. And so if that means asking for help or support from loved ones, then please do it. Because more than likely, the people in our lives, they want to be there for us, and they want to help us, and they want to support us, but they maybe don't know how, and they don't want to overstep any bounds. Because with this Jupiter retrograde in Cancer, it's all about nourishing ourselves and trying to fill up our own cup. But, sometimes we can't just fill up our cup on our own. We need community and we need people in our lives. And, that doesn't mean like putting it all on other people to fill up our cup. We have to be, working on ourselves and doing the work on ourselves and working on taking good care of ourselves and nurturing ourselves and nourishing ourselves in a way that, fills up our cup. But also, having other people in our lives that pour into us and pour into our cup, that helps fill our cup a little quicker. But sometimes that means you got to tell other people in your lives how to fill up your cup and what to fill up your cup with. Or maybe you're someone where it's like, it may feel like you've got cracks in your cup, where it feels like as soon as you fill up your cup, it just kind of leaks right out. And if you have cracks in your cup, that doesn't mean you're broken or anything. It just means that you've got to work on, healing those cracks. And so maybe it's like under this full moon, those cracks are really being illuminated and being brought to your awareness. And so we're being given an opportunity to really heal those cracks, either through, maybe it's like you got to set some boundaries with people, or maybe it means scheduling in some more downtime to rest and recharge, or, be creative. Or maybe it's something a little bit deeper where it's like, maybe it's time to actually seek out professional help that can help, heal and fill in those cracks. So again, just really try to pay attention to any, emotional reactions on and around this full moon, and just pay attention to how you're feeling, emotionally, but also how you're feeling in your body, because those feelings and emotions are really acting as our guides right now, really helping to show us what we need in order to feel emotionally safe and secure. And again, Jupiter is really expanding our awareness of these things right now as well. Jupiter is also that planet of opportunities. And so this full moon is really presenting us with the opportunity to, ask for help and ask for that support and really reflect and integrate on the lessons that we've learned over this past year. And when I was looking at this lunation chart, it was kind of giving me like this feeling of like, the Grinch. We're all pretty familiar with the Grinch, and, spoiler, at the end, his heart grows like 3 sizes. And so that just kind of like gave me the energy of this full moon. I just felt like our heart is just really expanding under this full moon, where it's like, our emotions are expanding and that inner landscape is expanding. And so our heart space is really growing and expanding our capacity to, receive that love and support or whatever it is that we crave most. And so this full moon is really helping us to really connect with our feelings and our emotions on a much deeper level. And so I really feel like, the people and the places and the things that matter most to us are really being lit up and brought to our awareness under this full moon. And so as we're reflecting on those things that really, matter most to us, it's also reflecting on like, what is deserving of your time and your energy moving forward into this new year. And I know that we're all probably, reflecting on like some of those New Year's resolutions or whatever. I don't necessarily think that this is a great time to be setting these New Year's intentions with a full moon, but I really do feel like, really feel into what matters most to you and feeling into what it is you truly care about and what you feel is worthy of your time and energy as we move forward into this new year, and then release the rest. Because across the sky in Capricorn, we have Venus, the Sun, and Mars all conjunct during this lunation, meaning that the full moon is forming an opposition to all 3 planets in Capricorn. The Sun is literally sandwiched between Venus and Mars during this full moon. And, Venus and Mars, that's like our desires and our actions and our values and our drive and what we want, and then how we go after what we want. And so it's all of this is being filtered through this like, practical, pragmatic, and responsible, disciplined, and ambitious lens of Capricorn. And Capricorn is that sign that is all about like building something that lasts long term. And so, Venus in this lunation chart kind of like softens things up, whereas Mars is energizing it and it kind of like sharpens it a little. And so with the moon's opposition, it's really like triggering this triple conjunction, and it creates a bit of tension and a need to balance these opposing energies. And so with this full moon happening on this Cancer-Capricorn axis or polarity, it really feels like there's a part of us that's wanting to like, hold our shit together by keeping busy and staying productive, yet there's another part of us that just really yearns to be held and supported and told that everything is going to be okay. And so again, oppositions really create this need to, balance these seemingly opposing energies. And oppositions are just like, when planets are sitting directly opposite each other like they do during a full moon. And so when we've got the Sun in Capricorn, it's all about like our outer world responsibilities and our ambitions and our sense of responsibility and discipline. Whereas Cancer is like that emotional and sensitive side of ourselves that's all about like, our emotional needs, that we need to feel safe and secure and that we belong somewhere. And so it's like Cancer governs our inner sensitive world and that place that we come from, like our family and our ancestors, whereas Capricorn governs like our outer world and where we're going in life. So under this full moon, we're really being asked to look at how these opposing energies may be relating to each other in our lives. And so looking at things like, where you may be prioritizing achievement and ambition and discipline at the expense of your own emotional well-being. Or conversely, where you may be staying safe and comfortable while avoiding something that requires more maturity or responsibility or discipline or accountability. And so it's not really like an either or situation where we have to choose one or the other, but it's a blending of the two and finding that common ground and finding that balance between the two and integrating all of it. And so it's like Cancer is asking like, does this thing nourish me? And it's like Capricorn is asking, is this worth the effort? And again, both matter under this full moon. And so I feel like whenever we have any kind of planet moving through the sign of Cancer, we tend to feel a little more like self-protective. And so under this full moon, this is a time to really release that emotional armor that we no longer need. And so it's kind of like, that Capricorn discipline can stay, but the rigidity and the emotional suppression and that isolation, like, that can be released and that can go. And so like I've been saying, don't be surprised if you find yourself feeling a little more sensitive or emotional under this full moon. That's kind of the point, because our feelings and our emotions are really kind of like our signals, really guiding us back to who and what actually matters to us and what can sustain us. And so as we have just entered a new year, really pay attention to what is stirring inside of you, like what kind of emotions are coming up inside of you and what is like, really calling to you that is telling you that like, hey, this thing really does matter to me. And so with this happening in Cancer, really, take some time just for yourself to nurture yourself and really reflect on, what feels emotionally sustainable for you moving forward into this new year. And what feels aligned with what you deeply and truly care about rather than, what you just think looks impressive to others. And then reflecting on what you feel ready to release before you commit to something new and even more aligned in this new year. These are the kinds of questions that are going to be setting the tone for this new year. And, 2026 is going to be an interesting, wild ride. Nothing that we're not already familiar with because we kind of got a taste of it in 2025. Like I've heard some astrologers say that 2025 was kind of like the dress rehearsal and now 2026 is like, the real performance as we are dealing with all of these outer planets making their final ingress into these new signs that are all air and fire. So it's going to be a new era this year. And so yeah, this full moon is kind of like setting the tone and it's kind of like a gentle entry into this new year. And so some ways to work with this full moon energy, of course, feel your feelings. That is number one. Let yourself feel however you're feeling without judgment and without trying to attach any kind of meaning to it. Just feel your feelings and take note of them. And then take stock of where you are emotionally right now. And if you're anything like me, then that seasonal affective disorder is really starting to settle in. And so that can make it a little more difficult to really do those check-ins. But again, just not judging yourself for feeling any kind of way that you're feeling or having emotions and just really taking stock of like your emotional bandwidth right now and looking at where you may be like over-functioning or overworking or carrying more than you actually need to. And you could also use this as a time to check in on your emotional boundaries, looking at where you may need a little more help or support right now, or, where do you need to say no, or maybe just not right now. Or where have you been trying to be the strong one for a little too long without working on replenishing yourself and nourishing yourself and really working on filling up that cup again? As we are in the middle of Capricorn season, really those small and practical adjustments really matter here. Also reflect on what safety and security actually feel like to you as well. Think of this as like an invitation to really rest and nurture yourself and nourish yourself. And so, cook your favorite comfort foods and, do your favorite self-cares, whether that's like, cozying up with a blanket and reading a good book or, watching a favorite movie, like a comfort movie or your favorite comfort show. I know we're in the middle of Capricorn season again, but this isn't like a hustle, like super ambitious boss bitch kind of energy full moon. Again, this is a time to rest and really tune into our bodies and listen to what our bodies need and really honor those needs. This is also a time to really get connected with what your heart truly wants and really, tune into who and what matters most to you and really, channel more of that into this new year. This is also a really powerful time for emotional release. It's not like you need to solve or fix anything, but just allowing yourself to feel those emotions and feel your feelings and let that come out. Like if there's something that you've been holding in for too long, just letting yourself feel those feelings as a part of like this full moon reset. This full moon is really coming in as a reminder that caring for ourselves is not separate from our responsibilities. It's actually, our number one responsibility. So really be responsible for yourself by taking good care of yourself and nurturing yourself and honoring that need for rest and speaking your truth gently but clearly. And remember that building a meaningful life requires both a solid foundation from which you can build from, but it also requires a soft and cozy, comfortable place for you to land. And yeah, I think that is all I've got to say for this particular full moon. So if you liked what I had to say, be sure to leave a like and also comment down below where this full moon is happening for you, in which house, and if it's aspecting any of your personal planets. and wishing you a beautiful Cancer full moon and a happy new year and an amazing start to this new year. And thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for being a part of my 2025. It has really been quite a year. But yeah, until next time, love you, bye!